The war between Israel and Iran is a conflict that's been building for decades and is now spiraling out of control. The Israelis began this phase with a huge wave of strikes on June the 13th that have continued for days, dealing damaging blows to Iran's nuclear weapons program and taking out key scientific and military personnel. Iran's response has been to fire missile and drone barrages, while some Israeli leaders speak openly of regime change in Tehran.
So are you going to target the supreme leader?
We're doing what we need to do.
The Middle East is holding its breath. After shocking US strikes on Iranian nuclear sites, regional powerhouses like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Bahrain, and Kuwait have drawn a clear red line: no military attacks on Iran from their soil. But this isn't just about bases, this is about preventing a regional inferno. Chapter 1. Washington pulls the trigger. The air was still in Tehran before the thunder came, US airstrikes tearing through Iran's nuclear facilities in a sudden, unannounced escalation. The Fordo enrichment plant, one of the most heavily fortified nuclear sites in the world, was among those hit. Washington's move was bold, direct, and as critics now say, dangerously provocative. It wasn't just a military strike, it was a geopolitical earthquake. President Donald Trump, returning to the global stage with a familiar playbook, justified the action as a necessary blow to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. But for many, the strike raised deeper fears: retaliation, proxy warfare, and the possibility of another drawn-out regional conflict, with US troops and foreign civilians once again caught in the middle. Just days before, European foreign ministers had been in Switzerland meeting Iran's top negotiator, Abbas Araghchi. The goal? Prevent exactly this. But diplomacy lost the race against missile launches. Chapter 2. Panic in the Gulf. Alarm in Tehran. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Qatar, home to the largest US military base in the Middle East, was one of the first to speak. Doha's foreign ministry released a strongly worded statement warning that the current dangerous escalation in the region may lead to catastrophic consequences at both the regional and international levels. It called for wisdom, restraint, and to avoid further escalation. Across the Gulf, panic echoed. The United Arab Emirates, often a quiet supporter of American foreign policy, voiced serious concern. Alongside Qatar and Oman, which had served as mediators in past nuclear discussions between the US and Iran, the UAE called the attack deeply concerning, urging all sides to avoid plunging the region into chaos. Even Saudi Arabia, usually the first to rally behind Washington's more aggressive policies, took a cautious tone. On high alert following the strikes, the kingdom warned of the grave implications and called for all efforts to exercise restraint and avoid escalation. For once, the Gulf states spoke in one voice. They would not be the launch pads for further conflict. Chapter 3. Drawing a red line. What came next was historic. In a rare display of unity, 5 key Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Kuwait, delivered an unmistakable message to the United States: no attacks on Iran from our soil. This was more than a statement, it was a geopolitical stance, a refusal to be drawn directly into a war they never signed up for. Quietly but firmly, these oil-rich monarchies closed their runways to offensive operations against Iran. In some cases, it was a diplomatic whisper. In others, a direct order communicated through embassies and military attachés. And it wasn't just about principle. These nations host tens of thousands of American troops, jets, and missiles. Qatar's Al Udeid Air Base alone hosts over 10,000 US personnel. Bahrain houses the US Navy's 5th Fleet. The UAE and Kuwait both allow forward operations from their airstrips. Yet now, even with US hardware in place, those bases would not be used to strike Iran again. Why? Because these countries know that a retaliatory missile doesn't check flight logs. Chapter 4. Iran's response. Inside Iran, the strikes triggered immediate chaos. Tehran's emergency services were overwhelmed, and reports of panic spread rapidly. Crowds gathered outside government buildings. Some demanded vengeance. Others just wanted answers. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps was placed on full alert. Radar coverage intensified across the Persian Gulf. Proxy groups in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon were told to prepare for potential escalation, but no orders to act were issued immediately. The key question inside Tehran was strategic. Should Iran strike back? And if so, how? The country's leadership knows a direct attack on US bases could unleash all-out war, but with regional outrage over the strikes, and even Gulf allies closing doors on US military escalation, Iran sees diplomatic opportunities too. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign ministry labeled the US attack a blatant violation of international law, insisting it reserves the right to respond in accordance with the UN Charter. Still, not everyone in Iran's circle of influence is eager for retaliation. Several proxy militias, normally reliable extensions of Iranian power, signaled reluctance. After years of sustained conflict in Syria and Iraq, many factions are fatigued, fragmented, or simply unwilling to risk annihilation for a symbolic counterattack. Chapter 5. The global reaction. The world watched with clenched jaws. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres was gravely alarmed. He called this a dangerous escalation in a region already on the edge. His message was blunt. There is no military solution. The only path forward is diplomacy. The only hope is peace. Russia's condemnation was fierce. Moscow called the US strikes irresponsible, a gross violation of international law, and a direct threat to peace. The Kremlin warned that continued aggression could spiral into a conflict that would engulf the broader region and perhaps even draw in global powers. Pakistan, Washington's sometime ally and the only Muslim nuclear-armed state, added its voice to the outrage. Islamabad called the strikes a violation of international norms and affirmed that Iran had the right to self-defense under the UN Charter. In Europe, there was quiet fury. Kaja Kallas, the EU's foreign policy chief, said the strike undermined months of delicate diplomacy. She warned that a nuclear-armed Iran was a global threat, but insisted that only negotiations could prevent that outcome. French President Emmanuel Macron, still attempting to preserve dialogue with Iran, warned of a dangerous context and called on Tehran to de-escalate. France, he noted, was not involved in the strike nor in its planning. Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz demanded that Iran return to the negotiating table and engage not only with the US, but also with Israel, which many suspect had a behind-the-scenes role in the operation. Meanwhile, in London, Labour leader Keir Starmer expressed support for preventing nuclear proliferation, but urged a return to diplomacy as the only stable solution. The region's volatility, he stressed, could no longer be ignored. Chapter 6. Allies and outliers. Who backed the strike?
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history. In Operation Rising Lion, Israel has done truly amazing things. But in tonight's action against Iran's nuclear facilities, America has been truly unsurpassed. It has done what no other country on earth could do. History will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons.
Not every nation condemned the US. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu congratulated Trump in a public video, calling the strikes a historic act that denied the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons. For Netanyahu, this was a mission accomplished at least for now. Ukraine joined Israel in praising the strike. Its foreign ministry said the action sent a clear signal that Iran's nuclear ambitions would not be tolerated. Kyiv framed the move as necessary to preserve peace in the region and prevent future threats to global stability. But across Latin America and the Pacific, the tone shifted. Venezuela's Foreign Minister Ivan Gil condemned the attacks as unjustified aggression and called for an immediate ceasefire. Cuba's President Miguel Díaz-Canel was even more direct, blasting the operation as a violation of the UN Charter and warning it could plunge humanity into a crisis with irreversible consequences. New Zealand's Foreign Minister Winston Peters struck a cautious note, urging diplomacy over military action. He stressed that further escalation would benefit no one and that peace talks were the only path to resolution. Even Australia, typically a reliable US partner, voiced concern. A government spokesperson noted that the security situation in the Middle East had become highly volatile and called on all parties to seek de-escalation. Chapter 7. The Energy Domino and $90 Oil. In markets from Tokyo to Wall Street, the impact was immediate. Crude oil surged past $90 per barrel, with fears that Iran might close the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow maritime choke point through which 20% of the global oil supply passes. Saudi Arabia and other OPEC producers were forced to review their export plans as shipping insurers jacked up rates. The Gulf's economic elite watched nervously. For them, war isn't just about borders, it's about billions. Ports, pipelines, oil fields, and LNG terminals are all vulnerable targets. And if Tehran decided to respond economically by disrupting energy exports or cyber-attacking key infrastructure, the fallout could be massive. No one in Riyadh, Doha, or Abu Dhabi wants to explain to investors why war broke out on their doorstep. Not when sovereign wealth funds are managing trillions of dollars in assets, from Silicon Valley startups to London real estate. Stability is the foundation of Gulf influence, and for now, that foundation is cracking. But the real flashpoints aren't just on the oil charts, they're on the military map. Chapter 8. Targets on the map. The US military footprint across the Middle East was never designed for peace. It was designed for deterrence, projection, and precision. Yet today, that vast network of airstrips, naval commands, and expeditionary forces is facing a new kind of pressure: targeted retaliation from a cornered Iran. In total, over 40,000 US troops are stationed across the region under CENTCOM's jurisdiction, from forward operating bases to full-scale headquarters. Bahrain has long been the jewel of the US Navy's Gulf presence. Since 1948, when the British handed over control, it's become a fully modern strategic asset. Home to the Fifth Fleet, Bahrain offers deepwater docking for aircraft carriers and destroyers. But it's not just a harbor, it's a command center, hosting critical logistics vessels, Coast Guard assets, and 4 specialized anti-mine ships used to secure the narrow Strait of Hormuz. Now, Iran's hardliners have publicly named it. In an editorial from Kayhan newspaper, a close mouthpiece of the regime, calls were made to directly strike this fleet and shut the strait to all Western vessels. That's not an empty threat, it's a roadmap. In Qatar, the US operates Al Udeid, the largest military base in the Middle East. This isn't just another compound, it's the forward brain of CENTCOM, managing air command, special operations, and even high-level strategic war planning. If a retaliation were to come, Al Udeid would be both a priority target and a launch site for US counter-response. Iraq presents the most volatile front. The US bases there, Al-Assad and Al-Harir, have already been hit by Iranian proxies in the past. In fact, after Qasem Soleimani's assassination in 2020, Iran launched missiles directly at Al-Assad. While the attacks caused no deaths, over 100 US soldiers suffered traumatic brain injuries. Syria's Al-Tanf base, near the tri-border area with Iraq and Jordan, is smaller but no less critical. It's used as a checkpoint to limit Iranian militia movement across borders, and it's constantly under threat from drone and rocket fire. In Kuwait, America's Ali Al-Salem Air Base is a vital logistics and deployment hub located just 20 miles from Iraq. It's the lifeline for quick airlift operations. Just next to it, Camp Arifjan houses CENTCOM's army leadership and pre-positioned equipment. If war escalates, Kuwait becomes a logistics artery and a soft target. The UAE's Al Dhafra Air Base offers cutting-edge surveillance. Home to F-22 Raptors, Reaper drones, and US intelligence infrastructure, it's also the site of the Gulf Air Warfare Center, where elite air defense exercises are held. For Iran, striking this facility would be symbolic crippling elite technology and American pride in one blow. Together, these bases form a strategic triangle of control over air, sea, and land movement across the Gulf, Red Sea, and beyond. But with Iran promising consequences, every asset is now under review. Chapter 9. How close are we to regional war? This may not just be a tit-for-tat exchange. It's the possible ignition point for a far larger, asymmetric war stretching from the waters of the Red Sea to the streets of Erbil, Doha, and possibly even beyond. Even as American officials talk about limited strikes, Iran's strategic calculus operates differently. Tehran's doctrine of forward deterrence doesn't rely on matching US firepower. It depends on flexibility, unpredictability, and depth. And even with setbacks from Israeli strikes and Gaza's destabilization, Iran's toolkit of resistance remains intact. While some analysts argue that Hezbollah and Hamas have been weakened by Israeli operations over the past year, Iran's reach doesn't begin or end with those groups. Tehran's network, from the Houthis in Yemen to the Shiite militias in Iraq, is vast, decentralized, and already mobilizing. Recent drone flights over U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria, as well as renewed threats from Yemen's Ansar Allah movement, suggest that Iranian-aligned forces are already shifting into action. These aren't symbolic gestures, these are calibrated signals. The message: Iran won't respond conventionally, but it will respond everywhere. And don't discount what asymmetric warfare looks like today. We're not just talking about rockets and roadside bombs. Iran has reportedly invested heavily in digital disruption, with the potential to hit everything from global shipping infrastructure to the digital systems that underpin regional oil pipelines. Despite Trump's earlier rhetoric about avoiding another Middle East quagmire, Washington is now deeply entrenched. The arrival of additional aircraft carriers, the reactivation of contingency plans for Gulf base evacuations, and coordination with European allies behind closed doors all point toward preparations for sustained escalation, not quick resolution. This isn't the Iraq invasion of 2003, nor the Soleimani strike of 2020. This is something more diffuse, more volatile, and potentially much harder to control. With thousands of U.S. troops scattered across 19 bases in the region, the Pentagon is staring at an impossible problem: protect every asset, everywhere, against an enemy that hides behind proxies, operates in shadows, and knows the terrain better than anyone. And it's not just soldiers who are at risk. Civilian shipping is already being rerouted away from Hormuz and the Bab al-Mandeb Strait. Insurance premiums on tankers have jumped overnight. And oil futures already climbing. What makes this moment uniquely dangerous is the blurred line between state and non-state action. In short, this won't look like a traditional war. It'll look like chaos, slow-burning, scattered, and deadly. Chapter 10. What comes next? The region's power brokers are now playing a delicate game of survival. The Gulf states have made their stance clear: no more escalation, not from our soil. It's a rare, unified moment, and perhaps one of the few things that can prevent this crisis from exploding into regional war. But the US remains unpredictable. Iran remains humiliated. Israel is emboldened. And the global diplomatic machine is struggling to catch up with events already in motion. Diplomacy may still have a chance, but it's on borrowed time. As UN envoys scramble and European ministers reconvene, the pressure is now squarely on Washington and Tehran. One misstep could redraw the map of the Middle East in fire. One smart move could save it. In a region known for conflict, restraint is now the most powerful weapon. With missiles grounded, bases closed, and leaders warning of catastrophe, the world watches and waits. Will diplomacy rise from the rubble, or are we already on the edge of the next great war? Only time and wisdom will tell.